Martha Needle seemed like a woman whose entire life was touched by tragedy. In the late 1800s in Melbourne, Australia, she lost her husband before losing all three of her young children, with each death spaced just far enough apart to seem like a cruel misfortune. At the time, illness was common and death came quickly, especially in households without much money. So no one looked too closely. No one wanted to believe that there was more to the story. But a few years later, another man connected to Martha fell ill, and this time things didn't go unnoticed. The pattern was too familiar, and once authorities started digging, what they found behind the soft-spoken widow's calm exterior would lead to one of the most unsettling murder cases in Australian history. Martha Needle was born Martha Charles on April the 9th, 1863, in the rural town of Morgan, South Australia. She was the eldest child of Mary Charles, and from very early on, her life was unstable. Her father died when she was still very young, leaving her mother to care for the family alone. In 1870, when Martha was about 7 years old, her mother remarried a man named Daniel Foran. Mary and Foran had 2 additional children, and the growing family moved into a small 2-room home in North Adelaide. The house was modest and overcrowded due to their strained financial circumstances. Martha would later describe her childhood as one of abuse and neglect. She claimed that her mother frequently beat her with sticks or rope, and at the age of 12, it was alleged that her stepfather had assaulted her. These traumatic events would leave a mark on her early worldview and eventually contribute to the emotional detachment and psychological disturbances that would manifest later in her life. At 13, unable to endure the harsh conditions at home, Martha ran away and began working as a housekeeper. It was a common occupation for young working-class girls in 19th century Australia, with few other options available for earning an income. In 1882, at the age of 18, Martha married Henry Needle. At first, their marriage appeared to be a happy one. Henry was a quiet man, and the couple quickly settled down together. They had 3 daughters, Mabel, Elsie, and May. For a time, the family unit seemed stable, but beneath the surface, tensions were slowly rising. In 1885, the Needles moved from South Australia to Richmond, a suburb of Melbourne. The move became a turning point in Martha's life. While by most accounts the relationship between her and Henry appeared to be normal and happy, the marriage had begun to deteriorate not long after arriving in Melbourne. Martha was known for her pleasant looks and enjoyed the attention of others, particularly men, while Henry was shy, withdrawn, and reportedly prone to jealousy. Accounts from the time period claim that Henry became increasingly controlling and violent, often beating Martha, either out of suspicion or resentment. Whatever new beginning they imagined only began to unravel further when that same year 3-year-old Mabel suddenly fell ill with symptoms that included violent stomach pains, fever, and vomiting. The doctor gave them no answers, attributing it to an illness passing through the city. When Mabel died, the family received £100 in life insurance. Naturally, as she appeared to grieve the loss, no one asked questions of Martha. 4 years later, Henry too grew ill. His decline was slower, more drawn out, but grimly familiar. He wasted away in much the same manner as his daughter, and when he died, Martha claimed £200. Next to wither and die would be Elsie, and then finally May. All 3 children passed away under nearly identical circumstances. Sudden illnesses that coincided with Martha becoming involved with a new suitor. There were signs, even then, that something was terribly wrong. Some suspect that Martha was experiencing what we would now call Munchausen syndrome by proxy, a psychological disorder in which a caregiver deliberately harms others to gain attention or sympathy. Martha seemed to shine in the role of the devoted mother experiencing an unbearable loss. People pitied her and marveled at her strength, her only detractors being those who believed she was cursed. While it's easy to see the large sums coming in from insurance payouts and jump to conclusions, it's worth mentioning that Martha invested much of it in a grand family grave at the Kew Cemetery. She visited it regularly, often alone, placing flowers and tending the gravesite. However, future events would reveal those quiet visits to the cemetery may have masked something far more sinister. By 1891, Martha had begun taking in boarders. Among them was a man named Louis Juncken and his brother Otto, German-born craftsmen who set up their saddlery business in the front room. Otto was the younger of the two. He was kind, polite, well-spoken, and Martha quickly warmed up to him. The relationship developed and quickly bloomed. Otto was no fool, but he was gentle, and there was something about Martha's calm and quiet sadness that may have drawn him in. The idea that he could be her second chance and her salvation. When he proposed to her, Martha eagerly accepted. But not everyone was pleased. Louis was deeply unsettled by the engagement. Whether it was instinct or insight, he didn't trust his brother's new fiancé. He protested the relationship and tried to talk Otto out of it. There was even talk of bringing in other family members to help intervene and break off the engagement before it was too late. But then, Louis became ill, and as before, it took hold at a frightening pace. What began as fatigue and discomfort spiraled into fever and digestive pains, symptoms that mirrored those of Henry Needle and his children. Doctors believed it to be typhoid, a plausible cause given the outbreaks at the time. No one suspected otherwise. When he died, his body was sent home to South Australia for burial. Another unfortunate tragedy, they said. Another man taken before his time, but Martha didn't seem stricken. If anything, she seemed more preoccupied with managing the details of her wedding to Otto. It was as though she'd simply cleared another obstacle from her path. But Louis's death triggered a ripple effect. When another Juncken brother, Herman, was sent to Melbourne to settle Louis's affairs and look into the saddlery business, Martha welcomed him into her home and even invited him to stay. She offered meals, tea, and her full hospitality. But behind the gentle voice and welcoming demeanour, there was a new unease. Because Herman, unlike Otto, was suspicious. He didn't believe the typhoid story. Something about the timeline, about the house itself, unsettled him. And then, shortly after dining with Martha, he too became violently ill. Only this time, Herman briefly recovered and quickly sought out help from a doctor. The symptoms didn't align with typhoid. The doctor advised him to call again if it returned, and it did, even more violently than before. The doctor, also growing suspicious, collected vomit samples and sent them for testing. The results were as startling as they were clear. Arsenic poisoning. Police were informed and a trap was set. Herman was asked to play along, and he sat down for one final meal at Martha's table, playing the role of a man too sick to suspect. The woman, who was still set to become his sister-in-law, served him tea, pouring it herself. As soon as he lifted the cup to his lips, Herman blew a whistle and officers burst into the room. Forensic testing later revealed that the teacup contained around 10 grains of arsenic. enough to kill 5 men. Martha was arrested, at first for the attempted murder of Herman Juncken, but the investigation widened and authorities ordered the exhumation of Henry Needle, the 3 children, and Louis Juncken. Every one of them tested positive for arsenic. Each body told the same story: traces of poison, slow suffering, and a woman who had played the part of the grieving mother and widow to perfection. The charges escalated to 5 counts of willful murder, and her trial was held at the Supreme Court in Melbourne, lasting just 3 days. It took the jury just 40 minutes to return with a guilty verdict. Through it all, Martha remained composed. No crying, no protest, only a calm that unsettled even the seasoned officers who had dealt with her. When the judge handed down her sentence, death by hanging, she didn't even flinch. A few days after Martha's trial, lawyer Marshall Lyle wrote to the governor on behalf of the Howard Association, urging clemency on the grounds of insanity. He acknowledged that her crimes were revolting, but argued that a mother who murders her children is, by nature, mentally ill. Lyle criticized the prison doctor's sanity test, which was a simple quiz on the 10 Commandments, and called for a proper medical inquiry. The governor forwarded the letter to the government, but Attorney General Isaac Isaacs dismissed it. He argued that Needle had received a fair trial and the petition offered no compelling evidence of insanity. The plea was denied and Martha's fate remained unchanged. While awaiting execution in the old Melbourne jail, Martha continued to receive visits from those few who still considered themselves her friends. Among them was a Mrs. Owen, to whom Martha wrote a final letter. "Try not to grieve too much for me," she wrote. Then finally, on the morning of October the 22nd, 1894, at exactly 8 a.m., Martha was led to the gallows. When asked if she had any last words, she simply said, "I have nothing to say." Then, without a struggle, she stepped forward and was hung. After her death, public opinion turned from fascination to discomfort. The idea that such violence had worn such a kind face and lived the life of a devoted mother unsettled many. The newspapers dubbed her the Black Widow of Richmond. Martha Needle was the 3rd of only 4 women ever hanged at the old Melbourne jail. Her death mask remains on display there, preserved as a disturbing reminder of her infamy. The others who shared her fate were Elizabeth Scott in 1863 for supposedly coercing 2 men to murder her abusive husband, Frances Knorr, a baby farming serial killer in 1894, and Emma Williams, another who had murdered her offspring in 1895. Unfortunately, Martha's legacy of violence didn't end with her. Years later, on July the 15th, 1920, her nephew Alexander Newland Lee, the son of her older sister Ellen, was executed at Adelaide Jail for poisoning his wife Muriel and 3 of their 7 children with strychnine. Whether coincidence or some darker inheritance, no one knows for sure. During the Great Depression, the Brighton City Council used blue stone from the demolished outer walls of the old Melbourne jail to construct seawalls meant to protect local beaches from erosion. Included in the salvaged materials were headstones of executed prisoners engraved only with initials and dates. Most were placed with their markings turned inward, hidden from view. But not Martha's. Her stone, marked simply M.N., and the date of her execution, was laid with its inscription facing out. For years it lay half buried by sand until it was rediscovered near Wellington Street, its letters still sharp against the stone. More than a century has passed since Martha Needle's name last made headlines, but her story is still preserved in museum displays and in the pages of history books. However history chooses to remember her, Martha Needle remains one of Australia's most unsettling and prolific female serial killers. Thank you for watching. Right then, take care, and I'll see you next time with another story to make you say, well, I never.